everyone's glued to Putin, Trump, and Europe squabbling over Ukraine's fate, a far bigger geopolitical plot twist is unfolding on the other side of the planet. India, yes, the world's fastest growing economy, is quietly drifting away from the United States and cozying up to Russia and China. And honestly, who wouldn't want India as an ally? But instead of strengthening that relationship, Donald Trump basically threw New Delhi under the bus, slapping India with some of the highest tariffs handed out to any U.S. trading partner. Classic. Trump bullying countries isn't exactly a new sport for him. Just a couple weeks ago, he strong-armed the entire European Union into a trade deal that handed the U.S. virtually all of the leverage. But gutting America's relationship with India, that's one move he's going to regret fast. Bloomberg wasted no time reporting that Trump's tense phone call with Prime Minister Modi unraveled decades of U.S. foreign policy. And how big of a blunder was it? Well, here's Ashley Tellis, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Trump's India strategy is utterly incomprehensible. It could become yet another one of those wildly expensive presidential whims that the country ultimately ends up paying for. In other words, Trump's doing what he does best, overplaying his hand, and in the process, the U.S. just tossed aside one of its most important partners, practically shoving India back toward its BRICS buddies, China and Russia. Honestly, the collapse of U.S.-India relations might be the most captivating geopolitical drama of 2025 so far. Let's rewind. Modi was one of the first world leaders to visit the White House after Trump won his second term. Most analysts predicted the U.S. would lean harder on India to counterbalance both China and Russia. Remember, it was Trump himself who pushed Apple to shift iPhone production from China to India. Just a few months ago, Washington was busy hugging India like its new best friend. But the Trump administration's proven one thing over and over. In its worldview, there are no actual allies. Not Europe, not India, nobody. And here's where it gets interesting. Unlike the EU, which bends to Washington's demands faster than you can refresh a newsfeed, India isn't playing that game. Modi didn't blink. Instead, he immediately pivoted to China and announced his first visit there in 7 years. The message is simple. In today's world, you can't just trust anyone. And you'd better have a plan B. India's plan B? Step back from the U.S. and strengthen ties with Beijing. So here's the real question. What's your plan B? Because in a world this chaotic, you either prepare or you get blindsided. The truth is, with the world as unpredictable as it is today, you absolutely need a plan B. And Nomad Capitalist is the best team I've found to help you build it. In fact, I'm heading back to Malaysia next month to speak at this year's event. But let's get back to India, because for years, New Delhi has played a delicate diplomatic tightrope act, staying officially non-aligned while balancing China on one side and the United States on the other. It's been a masterclass in geopolitical finesse. Unfortunately for India, Donald Trump has zero patience for any nation that won't fall perfectly in line with his America first or else doctrine. In this administration, he's tried pressuring historically neutral countries like Vietnam and Brazil into choosing sides, and fully convinced he can muscle any nation into submission. That strategy already blew up in his face. Both Vietnam and Brazil sized up the situation instantly and moved closer to China, signing massive trade deals that clearly signal where their futures lie. And instead of learning anything from those failures, Trump is now running the exact same playbook again, this time on India. When you look at how strategically valuable India is to the United States, the idea of strong-arming New Delhi with sky-high tariffs is downright baffling. But Trump didn't stop there. He publicly claimed that India's economy was dead and that the U.S. barely trades with India, adding that maybe it should stay that way. Calling India's economy dead is peak Trump. Let's not forget the time he fired his own labor secretary for presenting job numbers he didn't like. It's pretty clear he's allergic to honest statistics. Because here's the reality. India's economy has been booming for decades. In 2023, its GDP hit $3.55 trillion with a stunning 6% growth rate, making it the fastest growing major economy on the planet, India's real GDP surged from about $266 billion in 1991 to roughly $3.7 trillion in 2023, a 13-fold expansion. Yet in the West, we still hear that India is the next China. Meanwhile, Trump is out here ignoring basic arithmetic and inventing narratives out of thin air. And he's not just wrong about India's growth, he's dead wrong about U.S. India trade, the two countries exchange hundreds of billions of dollars a year. In some industries, America relies on India almost entirely. Take pharmaceuticals. India is an absolute giant, sending over $10 billion worth of medicine to the U.S. every year. Nearly 40% of all generic drugs Americans take come straight from India. Now, imagine what happens if Trump goes through with his idea of slapping special tariffs on medications, tariffs that could reach 250%. U.S. drug prices are already absurd. This would send them into orbit. And as usual with Trump's tariff policies, the people hurt the most would be everyday Americans. For years, Washington has been scrambling to de-risk from China and manufacturing. But in the near term, and across most industries, that's almost impossible. China's dominance is simply too massive. The one country with the population scale and potential to even approach China's capacity was India. And now Trump's tariff war has basically burned that bridge to the ground. Slapping a 50% duty on Indian goods wipes out America's last realistic shot at diversifying production away from China. U.S. corporations, from tech companies to textile manufacturers, have poured billions into India. Apple alone invested heavily in Indian plants to produce iPhones for the U.S. and global markets. So how exactly is Washington supposed to encourage Apple or anyone else to shift supply chains out of China when the alternative is suddenly hit with a massive 50% tariff? It makes absolutely no sense. And it's not just manufacturing that's at stake. India churns out millions of highly skilled graduates every single year, most of them trained in critical STEM fields. And one of India's biggest struggles has always been keeping that talent at home. A huge share of its brightest minds head overseas. And their top destination, unsurprisingly, is the United States, where they become the backbone of America's tech machine. Just look at Silicon Valley. Indian-born CEOs and innovators run some of America's most iconic giants: Alphabet, Microsoft, IBM, Adobe, and plenty more. But now, thanks to Trump's tariff barrage, combined with a crackdown on foreign students, Washington is basically engineering the perfect exit ramp for those future AI researchers, engineers, and scientists. Instead of coming to America, they'll stay in India, boosting its tech ecosystem, fueling its innovation, and potentially teaming up with China to chip away at U.S. dominance over the long haul. And that's only the beginning. Potentially losing India as an ally would be a catastrophe for U.S. Strategy toward China. Remember, one of Washington's top long-term goals has been containing China by surrounding it with bases, alliances, and regional partners. And for years, India was practically doing the work for free. The India-China relationship has been tense for decades. Border clashes, strategic rivalry, historic distrust. New Delhi didn't exactly need encouragement to act as a counterweight. But now, with Trump slapping punitive tariffs on India and Modi making a high-profile trip to Beijing for the first time in 7 years, the U.S. is basically removing one of its most valuable chess pieces from the board. Voluntarily. Even worse, Trump has pushed India directly into China's arms. That's a massive win for BRICS, another notch for Russia, and a very clear reminder that we're living in a multipolar world where U.S. influence is no longer guaranteed. Trump's decision to isolate India fails spectacularly on all three fronts. It cripples attempts to shift manufacturing out of China. It hurts America's own tech sector by choking off future talent. It undermines U.S. geopolitical strategy against China. As we've said on this channel before, this is the kind of move you'd make if you were actively trying to kneecap American power. So the big question is, why is Trump doing this? Well, The trigger was India's refusal to stop importing Russian oil despite U.S. sanctions linked to the war in Ukraine. But here's the twist. Once again, America's hypocrisy is showing. Trump is punishing India, even though plenty of other countries are buying Russian oil, including the United States itself. Lots of nations still rely on Russian crude. And in the European Union's case, they're literally buying Russian oil that's been rerouted and rebranded through India as an intermediary. If that sounds absurd, it's because it is. And the U.S. has even less moral high ground than it pretends. America still imports Russian uranium to run its nuclear sector, and not in small doses. In 2023, a full year after Russia's latest invasion of Ukraine, the United States bought 27% of its enriched uranium from Russia, more than from any other country. Even today, a huge chunk of America's nuclear fuel comes straight from Moscow. So when Washington lectures India about playing by rules, it doesn't follow itself. It shouldn't be surprised that New Delhi is drifting back toward its BRICS partners. The message is clear. Washington values control, not loyalty. And to show you exactly what that looks like, here's a real-world example from Africa. After Kenya made an official visit to Beijing and publicly praised China's influence in shaping a new global order, the U immediately snapped back, threatening to downgrade Kenya's ally status and restrict key security agreements. All because Nairobi dared to say something positive about China. Even a straightforward agreement between two sovereign nations like China and Kenya is apparently too much for Washington to stomach these days. And with Trump, the pattern couldn't be clearer. He doesn't punish countries out of principle. He does it because he's a bully. And the thing about bullies is simple. Nobody wants to deal with them, which is exactly why Prime Minister Modi is drawing a line in the sand. Alongside his very public pivot toward Beijing, Modi has doubled down on his ties with another BRICS partner, Russia. In direct response to Trump's tariffs, he sent his national security advisor to Moscow and then fired off an even stronger message on X. I had a very good and detailed conversation with my friend President Putin and reaffirmed our commitment to deepen the India-Russia special and privileged partnership. He even added that he's looking forward to hosting Putin later this year. Now, pay close attention because every word of that statement is intentional, especially the part where he calls Putin a friend. In my view, that was a 100% deliberate shot aimed straight at the Trump administration. Modi used the word friend to remind Washington that India has options, and plenty of them. The U.S. wanted India to sever economic ties with Russia. Instead, India responded by strengthening them. And Modi wasn't done. Speaking at a public event later that week, he openly warned, I may have to pay a very heavy price personally for refusing to cave to Trump, but I am prepared for it. From world leaders to America's own foreign policy establishment, everyone is trying to figure out what the strategy is here. Everyone, that is, except the people inside Trump's cabinet, who still seem to believe the old Trumpy-Modi bromance can somehow be revived. But that era is fading fast. India is digging in, solidifying its relationships with Russia and China, and sending a message to everyone watching. This is the new geopolitical reality. Trump has taken one of America's most valuable partners and shoved it directly into the arms of two of Washington's biggest rivals. And this isn't just any country we're talking about. India is a nuclear power, the world's fastest growing major economy, a manufacturing giant in the making, and the only real demographic counterweight to China. Losing an ally like that isn't a minor foreign policy slip-up. It's a once-in-a-generation blunder. But it goes even deeper than that. This isn't just about losing India. This is about accelerating the rise of a multipolar world. Every time Washington uses economic pressure on a partner, it reinforces the BRICS narrative that the world needs alternatives to U.S.-led systems. India, already a founding BRICS member, now has every incentive to deepen ties within that bloc, not just with Russia and China, but with a growing line of countries eager to challenge American dominance. By trying to force India to bend, Trump may have permanently reshaped the balance of power in Asia. Instead of isolating Russia, he strengthened the Russia-India axis. Instead of containing China, He pushed India closer to Beijing, and instead of reinforcing America as the natural partner for rising powers, he demonstrated that U.S. alliances can be discarded on a whim. While Trump is busy playing short-term power games, India is positioning itself as a central pillar of an emerging multipolar order. And in that world, Washington is no longer the only option on the table. Everyone, thank you so much for staying with me to this point in the video. Thank you for the incredible support, and thank you for spending your time with me here on YouTube today.